Raising a child with special educational needs or a disability comes with many extra challenges. Today, a group of parents in Bristol are taking the City Council to the High Court over its decision to cut spending for children like theirs by £5 million.
It's the first case of its kind, but at least 2 other councils will soon face similar challenges. Breakfast's Jane McCovin has this report.
Local authorities are feeling the heat of falling budgets and rising demand for services, especially when it comes to the support of children with special educational needs. Like Kian, who has ADHD and autism.
It was really hard to focus and concentrate and stay in lessons for a certain amount of time in school beforehand.
But now you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Kian wants to work here on the steam trains, and right now he's working towards his GCSEs. But the one-to-one support and speech and language therapy which make that possible is costly. And his council, Surrey, says it has to make savings of £21 million on its SEN budget, a move the family will soon fight in the High Court.
If they don't have the funding in mainstream schools, then the teacher in a mainstream school is left with, say, 28 children and 2 with SEN. The 2 with SEN don't get the support, so that teacher has to direct the time for the 2 with SEN to keep them, to help them understand, to maybe help with the behaviour, that kind of thing, and all the children lose out.
Surrey Council said, "We are defending this claim. Our main focus is making sure children get the support they need." But that judicial review is one of 3 going to the High Court this year. The first will be heard here in Bristol today. A court order means we can't identify the family behind that challenge.
One of my boys has missed a whole term, bar 6 days, because his additional needs aren't being met, because they haven't got the funding to meet them, and it's a sad, scary place to be.
And you know that Bristol has the worst exclusion rate in the whole country, in primary school and secondary school. What does that tell you?
That we need funding for our children.
Not cuts.
Not cuts, no.
Bristol is one of 39 local authorities which have signed this letter to the Secretary of State for Education. It says they are deeply concerned by a lack of adequate SEND funding and far-reaching reductions to provision. That letter has also been signed by Hackney.
No cuts for SEN.
Their protests have been held in the face of cuts to tackle a £6 million overspend. Their parents are also taking the council to the High Court. But now that council is considering a legal challenge of its own, a judicial review against the government. You are having those conversations right now?
Yes, we have to, with other councils, about possibly taking the government to court.
What would that look like? How would you do that?
Well, it would look like the 27 out of the 32 London councils, who between them are 100 million overspent, JRing the government because the government isn't giving us the funds we need.
The Department for Education told us we recognise there are pressures on high needs budgets, and that is exactly why funding is rising to £6 billion this year, the highest on record. But medical advances and better diagnosis means that demand for services is rising at an even faster rate. These are thought to be the first legal challenges to broad SEN cuts. They are unlikely to be the last. Jane McCubbin, BBC News.
Every day in England, more than 900 children with special educational needs are missing school because they've been excluded. That's a figure being described by a scandal by a group of MPs.
Yeah, they say that the focus on league tables discriminates against lower ability children, as Breakfast's Jane McCubbin reports.
You have to send in all the evidence to what you are claiming.
Just some of the documents from Natasha's legal battle against her son's school. He didn't want to be filmed. He has ADHD and he struggled after changes in his mainstream secondary.
Suddenly they brought in a zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance policy does not work with children with SEN. He got his first exclusion in year 10 for a very minor incident.
What like?
He actually wore the wrong colour socks to school.
Colourful socks, swinging on his chair, defiant behaviour. Behaviour, the school said, fully justified a series of exclusions, but a tribunal said that behaviour was linked to his disability and he had been discriminated against. The school told us they have since retrained staff and hired an educational psychiatrist.
I think schools can come away from excluding students if things are put into place to support students. If he had had that support, he would have shone.
Today, this report says much more should be done to curb exclusions. They've increased 40% in the last 3 years, but almost half of all of those are pupils with additional needs. That's over 900 SEN kids out of education every single day of the school year. This is in England. In Scotland last year, only one child was permanently excluded. MP Robert Halfon, who led on this report, says this has to change.
At the moment, it is, in my view, discriminatory because the level of it is reached proportions that we could never have imagined. There's a wild west of exclusions going on, and this is wrong. Whether it is due to too much zero tolerance in the classroom, whether it is resource issues, whether it is training issues, whether it is schools off-rolling pupils because they're worried about exam results. Whatever the reasons, it is wrong, and the government have to act and stop this.
Here in Halfon's constituency, over half of all children with SEN go to this one school. At Passmore, they say inclusion is in crisis, with schools judged only by academic standards.
There are so many horror stories about it happening across the country, and it's disproportionate because actually we're rewarded for not being inclusive at the moment. That's the problem.
Off camera, you used a really strong word to me. You used the word fraud.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Our funding agreement as an academy with the government says we will serve our whole community. If they're not serving the whole community, they're committing fraud because they're taking money and not doing the job they're being paid to do. And actually, the government needs to grow some teeth around it. Ofsted needs to grow some teeth around it.
The Department for Education told us the number of children being excluded is lower than it was 10 years ago, but they should only ever be used as a last resort. But today's report says they need to start judging schools differently and reward inclusion alongside results. Jane McCubbin, BBC News.